Hello, it's Kate here. I'm doing another transgender vlog. It's been a little while. Um, the last one I did was the one where I used that voice changer, which was a fun little experimental change of pace. But as you can tell in this one, I'm just back to my natural voice, which is fine. And actually, one of the reasons I'm recording this is because in exactly 1 week, I will be starting my transgender voice training, like officially, like not just I watched some YouTube videos and tried to do it on my own, but actually am getting some feedback from a trainer, which should be interesting, and hopefully it will make my voice a little better, a little less clockable, I guess. Hopefully, it won't make it like worse. That would be kind of not great. But one of the reasons I'm recording this is so I've got something to compare it to, and you do too. So in 4 months or so, whenever the thing's done, I think it's 4 months because it goes with like the semester up at the university. Um, in 4 months' time, I'll make another vlog, and then you can compare and be like, hey, that sounds great. Or, hey, that doesn't sound very good at all. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Um, so that's one reason I'm making this vlog today. The other one is because I've had something interesting on my mind over the last little while, and before I talk about it, I want to give a disclaimer that because this is something that I've been feeling and I've been experiencing, but it doesn't necessarily translate to all trans people going through or experiencing the same things I do. So don't assume that this is necessarily a universal experience when it comes to trans people, though I do believe that a fair amount go through something like this. Um, so if you are trans and you relate to anything in this video, please leave me a comment and being like, oh wow, I really do feel that. That's interesting. Or alternatively, leave me a comment that's like, I've never felt anything like that. I don't know what you're talking about. Either way, I think it would be interesting to hear from you. But what I want to talk about specifically is identity. And more specifically, identifying myself as Kate, with that name specifically, and what that means to me, and how much I identify with that persona, I guess, for lack of a better term. Um, because it's different from my gender identity in an interesting way. Uh, so back last May, like a year ago May, so 15 months ago, because I'm recording this in August, is when my trans egg cracked. And at that point, I knew I was a woman, almost immediately when I got called Miss. I had to confirm it with myself, but I knew it right then. And that's always been the case since then. You know, I've never gone back to the point where I was like, well, no, maybe I do feel more like a man. No, it's always been, I feel like this is what my core identity is. This is who I am. Um, with Kate though, with the name, um, it's the process has been a little different. Um, when I look in the mirror in the morning and I don't have any makeup on and I'm wearing like my pajamas and I my hair is poofed out everywhere and I look like a lion because that's how I wake up. Um, when I look in the mirror, I don't think like, oh hi, it's me, it's Kate. It's it's something a little more bizarre, I think, and it's hard to describe this precisely, but I'll give it a shot. It's more like I look in the mirror and I see myself, but it's like I don't have an identity, if that makes sense. It's not like I look at myself and I see like my old I'll use this hand to represent my old masculine identity, like I don't want to dead name myself, but who I was before I started transitioning, which is not an identity I ever really like connected that hard with anyway. It was just the only one that I had. Um, but I don't look in the mirror and see myself not made up and think, oh, I feel like this anymore, because I don't feel like this ever anymore. Um, but at the same time, I don't look in the mirror and be like, hey, it's me, Kate, the woman that looks like a woman. It's more like, oh, hey, an unfinished canvas almost is I think a good metaphor for it. Like, and I don't mean that literally, like that I look like a blank face with no features, but it's more like I look like somebody who isn't quite done yet, who is not really a person as much as it is somebody that needs to be made up to become a person. Um, that's the best I can do to describe it. It's a weird feeling, but I feel like it's something that probably a lot of trans people have felt, which is one reason I want to hear comments if anybody else has felt like this. Um, and so it takes a lot of effort for me, health not healthcare, self-care and grooming, like putting on makeup, getting the right wardrobe, and also more long-term things like hormones and medical procedures and such, and even like growing out my hair. Like, this is my actual hair, by the way. The bangs are fake, but everything else is actually real, which is nice because it means I don't have to wear those toppers anymore. I like those toppers a lot. Like, I felt really nice in them, but it's also nice to just have my own natural hair out. Um, but so I have to do a lot just to be able to feel like myself. Um, and I think that's kind of the crux of what gender dysphoria really is and how it feels, is the inability to look at yourself and identify yourself as who you see and who you are. Um, I remember specifically yesterday, I really got a look that I really liked when I went to work, and I felt like my inner monologue, if I don't look right, doesn't call myself Kate, or at least it doesn't feel as instinctual. I have to like force it. But if I look right and I feel right, it feels more instinctual. And the funny thing is with that is that it also, when I'm in that state, I guess, it feels like I can accomplish more. There's like my executive functioning is better, and just my ability to deal with the world and do what I need to do is much better when I feel like a person. I Partly that sounds obvious, and partly that sounds so bizarre, but that's kind of how dysphoria, what it is. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if you've never experienced it before. But so, and a lot of it's just little things. Um, it's I put on makeup and I'm not quite there, and I put on lipstick and that helps. I put on the hairband and the hair, and a big part of it is also just body shape. Like, I haven't, my stumbling block at the moment is my hips. Like, the fact, here, I'll show you real quick. Like, I don't have hips. This Everything from here down to here looks like a fat guy. It's not great. I don't know if the mic picked that up, but hopefully it did. But everything from there to there doesn't look right. Doesn't look like Kate is supposed to look for me. Um, I don't know if I'll ever have hips. Hormones will change your hips if you start them early enough. Um, but I obviously didn't, because I started them when I was 41. And there are ways to kind of hide that. One thing that I do is I like to wear long cardigans or sweaters or coats or whatever, and then when I look at myself in the mirror with those, it kind of hides the fact that I don't have hips, and I feel a lot better about myself. I can't do that right now because it's August and it's 92 degrees outside, even though it's like 7:45 at night. So it's a little too warm to wear long coats right now. Um, which is unfortunate because then it makes me feel like I can't go outside um and feel like myself. And part of it is my own personal identity, and part of it is just um safety. Like, I don't want to get clocked by the wrong people and then be in danger, especially in today's social political climate. It's not easy to be a trans person in public. Um well, and that brings me to talking about being clocked and being passing and all of those issues. Because they're really two levels to passing or clocking, like on whichever side you want to go on. And one of them is the being able to go outside with a gender expression that means that people aren't going to just automatically assume that you're a guy. Um, and then the other one is like the higher one is going outside and people aren't able to tell that you're trans. People think that you look enough like a cis woman that they're going to assume that you're cisgender. Um, Now that's probably not going to happen for a lot of trans people. It's probably never going to happen for me. Maybe it is. You never know. Hormones do a lot. It just takes a very long time. Um, and that's less important, honestly, if we lived in a world where people treated trans women the same that they do cis women. If that were the case, then it wouldn't matter. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world. Um, at least externally, it wouldn't matter. Internally is a bit of a different issue, and that's going back to this identity thing. Um, Kate to me passes as a cis woman. Is some, or at least, maybe not entirely, like jawline things, Adam's apple, those kind of things that I really can't do anything about ever. Um, Barring some really expensive medical procedures. But like those kinds of things are less important. But Kate has hips. Kate has um longer hair, and so when I get to the points where I see myself and I can identify as Kate, it's because the person I see in the mirror has those characteristics. Um Also chest, that's also part of it. But so it's not just for safety or to not look trans. It's because the person that I feel like I want to look like looks like a certain way, and it's not necessarily someone who I think this is the final part of the identity that I have to eventually deal with, and I think most, if not all, trans people have to deal with this in one form or another, which is where's the line where you can feel like yourself, even if you're not quite quote unquote cis passing, but you still feel like who you see in the mirror is who you are. And I feel like that has to come down a little bit from the line of cis passing for a lot of us that don't really have the option. Like there will inevitably come a point where I will have to be okay with the fact that my hips don't exist. Unless I have miracle hormones or can afford some really expensive surgeries. I just have to come to terms with that. Um, which is not easy, but it is something that I don't know if I'll ever quite be able to. I think, and this is where the disclaimer really comes into effect, because there might be some trans people that are better able to accept those parts of themselves, or maybe they're like gender fluid or non-binary, so it really doesn't matter. Like they're happy with them being kind of in between. I'm not that though. Um, at least not to that extent. And so it's hard figuring out where that line is. Um or how best to hide it with the long sweaters or with makeup or with whatever you need to do to look more like you need to get rid of that gender dysphoria and to be able to literally connect with your own identity so that you can function as a normal human being. Anyway, I find the whole concept fascinating even as I'm struggling with it. Like part of me struggling with it, and then the other part of me is looking at it from the outside being like, that's interesting that this is how things are. Um Excuse me. But I do want to iterate as one final thing, before I close off this vlog, that even though the gender dysphoria stuff, this does kind of sound like mental illness issues when you're dealing with executive functioning and stuff. It's not because being transgender is a mental illness, because it's not. Gender dysphoria, that is, but it's treated by transitioning, whatever that needs to be for the person. Um, and the reason it's not is because if you misgendered a cis person, if like you say you had like a cis boy that was like physically masculine and mentally masculine, but you treated them as a woman in whatever society you were in, as some sort of wacky science experiment, or maybe like as an intersex issues or something, like they would have dysphoria just as bad as any trans person does. Um, Being trans is not an illness. It's just a different way that you're built. Um, any more than having blue eyes is an illness, or having dark skin is an illness. It's not. It's just a different type of person. And I even had to recently uh, had kind of a falling out with some friends of mine who, when I was asking them to just treat me with dignity and like proper name and pronouns, that those kind of things, and they came back to me with like these very long messages about relating my transgenderism to various mental illnesses that they had. And I'm not going to get into the details because it's not important and I'm not airing dirty laundry, but the fact that they thought that the accommodations I was asking of them were equivalent to them asking me for accommodations for mental illness reasons. Whether or not that's justified is a whole different thing that I'm not interested in. The short answer is, yeah, you should accommodate people with mental health struggles. Of course you do. Um, but the fact that they were equating those two things just made me feel like that they didn't treat my gender as something not I'm not even sure what the word I'm looking for is, but they didn't treat my gender as something unproblematic, I guess, is the word I'm looking for here. And I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people do is when they have to deal with trans people, because we're relatively uncommon, I guess. It means that they have to feel like they have to accommodate us like they would accommodate someone with autism. Now, a lot of trans people have autism, and I'm one of them. Um, but those are two separate things. Um, so anyway, and but they could not see that, and eventually I had to kind of part ways with them, at least temporarily, um, because I need my gender to be part of me, not an ill part of me that needs treatment. The dysphoria needs treatment, but not my gender itself, and not being trans itself. None of those are illnesses. Anyway, I just wanted to pontificate upon those issues of identity and stuff. Um, I've done this recording 3 times, and the the first time I messed up halfway through. The second time I got called away, and then the third time my microphone wasn't up, turn like volume wise. So I hope that this one actually goes through. But if you're trans, or even if you're not, and you feel like you relate to anything that I've said, especially about the identity stuff, because I'd be so curious to know if other people have had experiences like this. Please leave a comment, message me, like let me know. I'd love to talk about it and see if this is something that people go through, or if it's just I'm just a bizarre outlier. I don't actually know. Um, but in any case, I'll make another vlog after my voice training is done. Maybe I'll make another one in the meantime. I don't know. But listen to that one when it comes out, and listen to this one, and compare the two. I think hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much better I will sound than I currently do. Or maybe I'll sound exactly the same, who knows. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.